Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap, news about SAP and Microsoft. Now, as I announced earlier this week, micro doesn't hold, one moment. Yeah. As I announced earlier this week, I will give you some special episode on DSAG, on the DSAGLive event that took place this week from Monday till today, till Friday. And so I will deviate from the usual agenda and purely focus on that topic. There are two things that I want to mention before I start. Point one, it's purely my point of view that I present here. Also, I'm voluntary working for DSAG in two special interest groups. This is not really my point of view on what happened this week. And second, it will be longer than the usual episode, so there will be, I think 50 minutes or so, because, 5 days, 10 keynotes, there is quite some stuff to say. Okay, let's start, let's go on. DSAGLive, the remote version of the annual conference of the German-speaking user group. The topic of this year was looking ahead to the long-term future, safeguarding sustainable success. There have been several press statements out. I linked them in my notes to this session. The most important one from my perspective is the link to the DSAG survey and to the press release, because there are all the basic informations there that are often referenced within the keynotes. Then I also want to draw your attention to an upcoming SAP podcast by Christian Michel in the Close the Gap series, where he has several interviews with SAP members that have had sessions at DSAGLive. They will be broadcasted, I think, next week. And in addition, all the keynotes will become available on YouTube. There are already, at the moment of this recording, I think 6 keynotes out there. So all the keynotes will become available there. Now, how did things go at DSAGLive? Well, this year it was a 5-day event due to the different setting of the stage. And day one started with the keynote of the CEO of DSAG, as well as the keynote of the CEO of SAP, Marco Lenk and Christian Klein. Now, Marco Lenk put as the basis of his talk the DSAG survey. That's kind of the usual thing every year. And he highlighted several points based on this survey. First of all, the topic digitalization, which was kind of the red line through all the talks at DSAGLive. Well, the crisis made it apparent. Digitalization is needed more than ever. However, the DSAG survey clearly showed that IT budgets get cut, and sometimes there are really severe cuts within the budget. Now, taking a look or making some kind of pulse check, the degree of digitalization in companies moved forward due to the COVID-19 crisis, but it's not where it could be. And it's not equally distributed in all companies out there. So as a consequence, what Marco highlighted and what also is part of the survey, there is a big tension between a decreasing revenue in the companies, a cut in the IT budgets, and an urgent need of digitalization. And this, of course, impacts also the SAP units within the company. So another point that came out was highlighted by Marco was the consequences on S/4HANA projects. So what happens to them if the budget gets cut? So the result was that 43% of S/4HANA projects are now delayed, or they are pushed back indefinitely. So now it comes in quite handy that the maintenance of the business suite was extended. But this is kind of a real problem. And another point that was highlighted by Marco Lenk, and I think that was really important, is switching to S/4HANA does not automatically mean that you are digitalized within your company. So this is also something that you have to keep in mind. Now, the biggest pain points for companies that also came out of the survey is, well, they need to improve the efficiency of their existing processes, where they lay most of the effort in at the moment. But in addition, they need to develop new digital business models and services, because otherwise they will not be able to survive. Now, this is something that was really stressed by Marco, that there is the need to change the business models and not only to bring digital business processes in the companies. So that's simply a difference. And what also became quite clear is that networking and relationships between customers and partners become essential, especially in crisis, and they need to be handled much more flexible. And this is something that companies have to keep in mind. Now, as a consequence of all that, the platform strategy becomes more and more important. So all the topics like integration, bringing out new business models fast, exploring, experimenting is super important. And what was highlighted by DSAG is, and which kind of reflects what all the members have, is the future is still hybrid. So there are things that stay on-prem. There are systems that stay on-prem. And there are systems that can go to the cloud without any hassle. So this is something that DSAG really heavily stressed. There is one good news concerning the platform strategy from the point of view that I'm taking concerning Microsoft, because according to the survey, SAP and Microsoft are the most relevant providers when it comes to the digitalization of core processes. And this is really focusing on, let's say, application development. It's not about operating systems. It's not infrastructure as a service. And if you take a look at the numbers, keep in mind that within SAP platform, there is also the cloud platform integration incorporated there. And that's why there is a quite high adoption of SAP cloud platform. And there was one thing that was highlighted and what's highly appreciated is that the strength of SAP are the core processes like FI, CO, and so on. And that's really undoubted by all the members, and that's really something that is highly appreciated. However, picking up the results of the survey of last year and comparing them with the survey of this year, one big topic was the product strategy and the trust of the customers of SAP in the product strategy. And the good news is it increased, but the not so great news is the level is still low. And this is definitely an issue, because that's also what Marco Lenk, or that's what Marco Lenk stressed. Reputation is one of the key criteria when you decide for or against a vendor. It's no longer features or something like that. It's trust, it's reputation of the vendor. So from my personal perspective, from my point of view, this DSAG survey is really super important, and it always delivers very interesting insights in the customer base of SAP. I think 2021 will be really challenging, really interesting with regard to this conflict of we need to do digitalization, and well, we have a cut in budgets. What I also liked, well, that's no surprise, Microsoft is number 2 when it comes to PaaS platforms for the DSAG members. That's simply great news. Now, as the second keynote of day 1 was after that delivered by Christian Klein of SAP, who, perfectly picked up all the topics that Marco presented and enriched them a bit with SAP's point of view. So what for him became clear in the crisis is, of course, that digital business models are key, and that they will last quite also after the crisis. Another point that he stressed was that trust and sustainability are two key ingredients in order to keep business models alive. And this kind of connected well to what Marco said. Now, Christian Klein switched to the kind of SAP take on the problem. And he said one of the most important problems of enterprises are that they have a lot of systems and they are fragmented all over the enterprises. So the data resides in silos, and as a consequence, end-to-end digitalization becomes super heavy, super difficult. So you cannot do a really end-to-end process from e-commerce to a digital supply chain if you have those silos. Then he made one statement that for me personally felt a bit strange, and it was a bit of a dig to the hyperscalers, and he said that lift and shift is not sufficient. I mean, of course that's true, it's not sufficient, but I don't know what was the intention of that statement, to be honest. It was just a little bit strange for me. Now then he switched over to what is SAP targeting in order to address those problems, and there he came up with the goal to have a really modular landscape, a really modular suite of solutions where you have a core plus industry-specific add-ons. And this is something that I already mentioned in previous episodes. It's the industry cloud that he was targeting. And the industry cloud comprises all the differentiating processes in different industries. At least that's what he was coining this industry cloud. And for SAP, the industry cloud is not the place of SAP, at least not where SAP has a big footprint, but it's the place for partners and for co-innovations with customers. So that's, from my perspective, one of the important key messages from this year's DSAGLive. Now then he also took up one point that DSAG often stressed, and that's cloud first is not cloud only. And this is something that he said SAP has understood. And from what I have seen throughout the week, SAP has listened to that. I have the feeling they struggle a bit. And I did not see a clear answer how the industry cloud, that is cloud only, kind of fits into that picture. Well, that's my taking. Then Christian kind of stressed the focus topics for SAP for this year and for next years in order to make this modular landscape reality. Point one, integration. No surprise that he stressed that, especially on the aspect to avoid data silos. Then he stressed the topic of a semantic data model across all solutions, which targets the One Data Model initiative. Then he brought up the point security, which is important. And then he brought up one point that really surprised me. And that's the statement that one focus topic is low-code and no-code solutions. I didn't expect SAP to stress that area, to be honest. And I hope that they will be partnering with different players out in the market. So up to now, as far as I have seen, Mendix is kind of the go-to thingy in that area, but there are other solutions out there and customers are using other solutions out there. So let's see how this thing evolves. Next, he brought up the point of what is now the key topic in order to be successful with digitalization, and that's the redesign of the business processes. This is perfectly in sync with the statement of Marco Lenk of DSAG, and he stressed that SAP delivers best practices in order to come along with those redesigns. Then he also stressed that artificial intelligence must be integrated into business processes. Well, if you take a look at what SAP is shipping, that's not a real big surprise from my perspective. I think that there is a big gap between where customers stand at the moment and where SAP wants them to stand, and I think this gap is quite big at the moment. And then he also brought up one other point that was reflected in several other talks at this week, and that was the project run times must be shorter. So SAP has to support more in that area, especially with technical tools, in order to make migrations and so on and so forth. So this is also something that's on the plate for SAP. So wrapping up this talk, I think the most important central point is the industry cloud was mentioned over and over again. This really seems to be the thing. Well, the other points that were mentioned and that were highlighted and that were said SAP is working on were exactly the ones that were addressed by DSAG. One remark, the SAP Keynote was also, there have also been, I think, 1 or 2 customer testimonials in there. Or perhaps it's only me, but they don't bring anything forward in such a keynote, to be honest. It's the German-speaking user group and the customer testimonial by SAP. Well, no surprise that within those testimonials they say that they have really made big progress with digitalization with SAP. That's what I expect. Then there was a discussion, a short round of discussion between DSAG and SAP. That was kind of the structure of every day, so 2 keynotes and the discussion. Within the discussion, the key messages were stressed again by both parties, so the necessity for integration. It was highlighted that the SAP key asset are business processes, business value. Super fair point, and that's something that all the customers also see SAP in, and that's also something that was appreciated. And the importance of the industry cloud and co-innovation. Now there was one statement that resonated with me, and that's something that you have to keep in mind from my perspective. Only increasing efficiency within projects will be not enough, because just focusing on that will increase the risk that you run into data silos, that you run into isolated processes, and that you run into process breaks. This is where all the networking topics come into play. And this is really, from my perspective, a very important point. And there was also one statement by DSAG. I don't remember exactly who made it in the round, but it was quite fitting, because the statement was that AI in one process is no real gain. It's basically useless. AI must be applied across process boundaries. So always the end-to-end processes must be taken into account. And that was something that I really liked to hear. Yeah, that was basically it from day one. So as usual, the general keynotes picking up the DSAG surveys. So now let's go to day 2. Day 2 usually is dedicated to more the technical areas. There was one keynote before that by Ralf Peters of DSAG and Thomas Sauersig of SAP on the finance and value chain, how to make a sustainable future already today. And well, the basic statement in that area was that innovation for the sake of innovation is worthless if it's not adding any business value. I think that's especially how innovation is hyped at the moment in several formats. It's an important statement. Then the, let's say, mantra of day 1 was picked up. It was cloud first, but not cloud only. Digitalization is always or has always to take into account the end-to-end process, the end-to-end story. And new business models are necessary, like XYZ as a service. Now, what was kind of brought in there was, then you need to think about consumption-based billing and so on and so forth. If you do that, yeah, that's true. I was a bit surprised that SAP was stressing that much. I don't know if that came from the area of SAP Cloud Platform, where they are a bit struggling with the topic, especially with the pay-as-you-go stuff. So I don't know, that was kind of a alien thing within the discussion. Now, what was stressed by SAP and what is where I personally also see SAP when it comes to innovations, they are business innovations. So they won't bring up technical innovations. Then SAP kind of switched over to the, let's say, usual topics like point one, industry cloud. So they picked up the message of day one. And there was one announcement that was surprising to me. That was the mobile enabling. That was stressed that the S4HANA Cloud is highly mobile enabled. And there is a beta program for some native mobile support in SAP S4HANA Cloud, as far as I understood. I never heard about that, but that was a message by Thomas Sauer-Essig. Then Thomas brought up another important topic that was based in the discussion round of day one, and he picked it up. That is the topic of sustainability. And he said sustainability must be part of the enterprise's KPIs. From my perspective, highly appreciated. That's great. And he said, as a consequence, the sustainability must be holistic and deeply integrated into business processes and data models. And this is where SAP is going for. He also addressed the Climate 21 initiative. I put a link into show notes. What's behind that SAP is pushing forward. Now, on the other side of the house, on the DSAG side, it was mentioned that, of course, cloud is an enabler. Be it S4HANA Cloud, be it SAP Cloud Platform, whatsoever. But SAP is not always making it easy to adopt it. So there is some double licensing issues if you have an S4HANA Cloud user who needs access to S4HANA on-prem. Typical situation if you have some satellites, some satellite subsidiaries where you introduce S4HANA Cloud and you have your core enterprise running on S4HANA on-prem. You need 2 licenses for that user. And what was also addressed, which was kind of picking up the message from day one, is there are missing migration tools. And because we all start from on-premise, if you want to go to the cloud, well, we need that tools in order to make the transition smooth and easy. Then there was one topic that was mentioned, and that was put as a highlight for SAP, and that's localization, especially legal requirements. That's a key asset of SAP, and that's a key asset that was very well appreciated by the DSAG, by the users of SAP, also picked up on the last day. Then there was a positive feedback by DSAG on the new Roadmap Explorer that I think is really cool. And the influencing topic, I personally do not agree with the influencing topic. I think the focus of the statement was that Ariba is now, for example, part of SAP's influencing program, which was not the case before. But for me, the SAP influencing program is still not very transparent. And there was one gap, stressed by DSAG, and that's the connection between roadmaps and the influencing programs that's missing, and that's really important. So this non-technical part, from my point of view, has two key messages. Is the sustainability that is really pushed forward by SAP, and it's really great to see that SAP picks up on the topic. And I think SAP has clearly understood that business is their core asset and it's adding value there, and this is highly appreciated, and customers see that this is really the thing where SAP shines, and that's where SAP should push their investments. Now then, there was for me personally, awaited keynote by Steffen Pietsch and Jürgen Miller from DSAG and SAP concerning cloud and cloud topics. So Steffen started with a general introduction, like what are the key pillars for the cloud, namely scalability, flexibility, delivering innovations, delivering them fast. And he brought up the example of how Microsoft scaled MS Teams during the COVID pandemic. And well, that's something that is really a very good example for that. I also put in the link to a video of Microsoft that shows what happened behind the scenes, and that's really quite some surprising insights. Then Stefan clearly stated that cloud is not a yes or no. So it's no longer a point of discussion. The answer is always yes, we will go to the cloud. Perhaps not with all our assets, but we will go at least partly to the cloud. But there is a lot of confusion in the land of cloud. So there is a very, very high need for information and for consulting. And when it comes to enterprises, there are some obstacles like security. That's, I think, quite obvious. And the topic of shared responsibility. And this is something really that I really like to hear, because this shared responsibility topic is something that's often forgotten. If you go to the cloud, you still, depending on the service that you use, you have a responsibility. And there was one citation of a study, I don't know where this was from, that was about cloud security. And it was stating that in 2025, 90% of all the cloud security problems will be on the customer side. And this is something that comes into play when we talk about security by default that was addressed to SAP, and the topic of zero trust, which is more a customer-specific topic. Then Stefan highlighted that data security is a topic, of course, and it's a very complex topic with a lot of influencing factors depending on the data and so on and so forth. And he also highlighted another point that I really like to see in a keynote, and that's the flip side, the other side of elasticity, of scalability and flexibility, and that's costs. Because you pay for what you use within the cloud, and if you use more, you pay more, and maybe you use something in an extent that you wouldn't want to. So governance and cost control is needed right from the start, and that really resonated with me that Stefan addressed that right from the start. Okay, then after those general remarks of Stefan, he switched over to SAP and cloud computing. So he once again stressed cloud first, not cloud only, because it's simply not applicable for every company. And he also brought up the point of the need for, let's say, integration purposes to have a harmonized technical and semantic perspective on APIs and data models, which is also something that was addressed now several times over the last years. And the point of trust that was also mentioned in day one, especially when it comes to cloud vendors, because going to the cloud also means you have a kind of a different degree of dependency to your cloud vendor. This is where Jürgen Müller took over and presented kind of SAP's offering. It's quite clear that the business technology platform is the central pillar for SAP, and he made the clear statement that the integration of SAP products will be as easy as never before. That's at least the goal. Smoothly going over to the integration topic. So as I said in the last episode, the roadmap for integration and the current status quo is publicly available. So we have wave 1, which is, I think, at 90% at the end of the year 2020. At least that's a goal. And SAP will not stop there. So there will be a wave 2 in preparation. Then there was 2 further news. If you watch this podcast, they are not really new to you. It's the S4HANA on-prem APIs are now part of the API Business Hub. And SAP Graph is now available also with a sandbox, which is partially true because that's only for not for on-premise systems. Then he took up the second point that is one of the key topics of SAP, that's the master data. It's the one data model, ODM, that he stressed. And I have to say, when taking a look at the SAP Graph APIs and how their responses look like, I'm a bit skeptical about the one data model. Of the Graph API that are exposed via the Graph API, because I really see issues about, let's say, domain-driven design and making good APIs and what is exposed at the moment. But yeah, maybe it's just me. There was some discussion, I think, going on Twitter. There have been some blogs I'm skeptical. I'm not really convinced. Well, then he brought up the services that come along, so master data integration service and so on. This is where DSAG kind of chimed in and said, yes, that's true, but there are still a lot of gaps concerning business partner, one of the, I think, central parts of S4HANA, and the customer vendor integration. SAP is aware of that. SAP is working on that. That's kind of the message that came over. Then Jürgen brought up the points that, well, due to this hybrid approach, extending SAP on-prem systems with the cloud is one of the key topics, and the obstacles to do so should be as low as possible. However, there is no integration roadmap available right now, because the integration roadmap that is currently in place is focusing on all the cloud products. But the good news is they are working on an integration roadmap. So that was kind of the two keynotes. Nice side note on that one. Before the keynote, Stefan Peach released a video on YouTube introducing the basic cloud terms, so a Cloud 101 video. I also linked that in the show notes. Now, from my perspective, based on this keynotes up to this point, SAP is working on the topics. They are making progress. They are not where they are not there yet, so there's still some work to do. For me, it seems to be quite hard for SAP to accept the hybrid reality of customers and to kind of align with it. So at least that's my perception. And one thing that I would like to mention is there have been some demos during the first days. SAP was always stating, we know that reality at customer side is hybrid. However, all the demos have been with S4HANA cloud systems. So I don't know why that was, if you want to bring over the message that hybrid is important to you. After that, as I said before, usual thingy, discussion, DSAG and SAP. Some very important points were brought by DSAG, highly appreciated. Cloud is not only SAP, so all the companies are using different cloud vendors, so there are simply more players out there, the hyperscalers out there, and they do not only act as infrastructure as a service providers, which is just true from my perspective, and I have the feeling SAP is struggling with that, but that's reality. Stefan also saw that well, customers use best of breed, so it's just a matter of fact, and PaaS is not SAP alone. That's also clearly stated within the DSAG survey, so that's reality. And then one important thing, kudos to Stefan Peach. He addressed the free-tier topic of SAP Cloud Platform that was originally brought up by Tobias Hoffmann, who wrote a blog about that. He addressed this within the discussion round, and Jürgen then said there will be news around SAP TechEd in December. Basically, there will be two news. The time limitation will be, I'm not quite sure, lifted or extended to a quite extensive amount, which is nice. But what is more important, free tiering on SAP Cloud Platform will come. And that's, I think, the more important topic. I expect more from SAP when there is SAP TechEd. What was stressed again was the integration topic, and especially the integration between cloud and on-premise, so hybrid scenarios. And in the aftermath of this day, there was an article published by Jürgen Müller on his LinkedIn account on hybrid integration. I post the link in the show notes, so some thoughts about what SAP was thinking about. And again, as a red line, the topic of sustainability was stressed again. So wrapping up day two, from my perspective, the keynote of Stefan Peach addressed exactly the right points, and I really liked the points that he highlighted concerning governance and this shared responsibility in the cloud, because they are often overlooked. Well, I hope that SAP will make fast progress with the on-prem topics, so on-prem and cloud integration topics. And there is one thing that I really did not like, and that struck me the first 2 days, and that were several side remarks by SAP concerning SAP and non-SAP systems. So there was one statement that when dealing with SAP data, use SAP technology. No, I don't think so. Customers will not buy into SAP exclusively. There will be more players out there. There will be a side-by-side extension not on SAP platforms. And I really hope that I simply listen too critically, and SAP will not put in any barriers in order to leave the safe walls of SAP. And yeah, as sustainability was stressed again, I really hope that this sustainability topic will not only arrive at SAP and Microsoft, but it will also arrive in the mindsets of customers and partners. But yeah, let's see what happens there, because I did not see it there to a large extent. Now, there have been 3 more days where there have been keynotes. These keynotes, or the topics of these keynotes, kind of are outside of my area of expertise, to be honest, but I want to draw some points that I took with me from that keynotes. Day 3, there was supply chain. I did not visit those keynotes. There was one keynote by Andreas Otzke of DSAG concerning the digital transformation, focusing on licensing topics. And yeah, licensing is still a big topic. And the digitalization, of course, is closely linked to an easy access to resources in order to try them out and to explore. And this is where licensing stands in the way, usually. Now, SAP is on the right track. They have made quite some improvements. That was clearly stated by DSAG. But it's not a one-time story. It's a continuous process. And things like digital access have to be improved over time. So I hope this point that was addressed by DSAG will be really taken up by SAP. What was also highlighted was the extension of the maintenance for the ERP. Also means that there should be a valid roadmap that goes beyond bug fixing for the time until, I think it's 2030. From my point of view, yeah, that's a fair point. Absolutely. And then there was one announcement, and I'm happy that I watched that keynote by SAP in that context. I think it was in the discussion. They are now offering, or they are working on an offering to have a system conversion to S4HANA Cloud for the managed offering of S4HANA Cloud. That's interesting, because up to now, if you wanted to go to S4HANA Cloud, this was purely a greenfield approach. And now this looks like, at least that was what I heard, now they're also switching to a brownfield approach. So what I took away from the keynote is, I think SAP still a little bit underestimates the hurdles that are need to really to be overcome in order to get your hands on SAP offerings. And what's important, and that's why I appreciate that the SAP Cloud Platform trial will be available for extended period, but that's not the point. And that's also addressed, I think, in one of Tobias Hoffmann's blogs. I want to go from exploration to production, so what I need is 3 tiers. And this well, is really important, because I think if customers cannot get their hands on there, this can become a real serious problem. Now let's switch to day 4, which was a kind of a, let's say, special day. It was all around the experience economy, customer experience. I think, at least from my perception, it was quite quiet in the area of customer experience, but SAP is fully committed to the area and is really making investments. What was interesting for me, I'm not that deep into the different modules of customer experience, of the customer experience portfolio, is that the core requests by DSAG are basically the same as for S4 and all the other things. It's integration, it's user experience, and it's reliability. I think that's especially to the perhaps not so new cloud solutions like C4, but I can only guess. C4C, sorry. DSAG's perception on the topics is that there are some functional gaps, but they are being closed. One big step, obviously, was the acquisition of Emersys concerning this multi-channel experience or omni-channel experience. And there was one announcement that was also on the customer experience event that took place in parallel. The launch of the customer data platform, CDP, that is based on the customer data cloud, formerly Gigia, that is now launched. That seems to be, as I said, I'm not an expert in CX, important. I thought that the customer data cloud would already be the thing, but obviously there's now one thing on top that you can use. As I said, it's not my home turf, this CX thingy, but I liked two contributions within the talks. One was by Bob Stutz of SAP. At the end of his talk, he said, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Just write me an email. I do not know if he will answer whatsoever, but I think that's really kind of a different mindset. That's a nice statement, and it's quite different than just saying, we listen. It's, hey, if you have a problem, reach out to me. I like that. And then there was a talk from a different perspective by Rolf Strauss, who was not SAP, not DSAG, which has one big statement in there that's not only true for CX projects and that I want to highlight here. He raised the question, how do you deliver successful projects? And the answer is, it's not by carrying in buses full of junior developers. And it's not a solution to do a staffing by availability. You have to bring in senior project leads and you have to bring in the right people. If they are not available, it's not an option to bring in anybody. I hope a lot of responsibles for projects listen to that. Then there was one other talk on day 4 that I want to highlight that was not a keynote. I have to highlight that, of course, it was a talk by Holger Bruchelt on SAP Embrace. It was 1 year of Embrace, examples of the SAP and Microsoft partnership. He first highlighted or put the spotlight on some common ground between SAP and Microsoft, like sustainability, where both have initiatives, where going local is one important topic especially when it comes to data security. So SAP and Microsoft are delivering their offerings in more and more regions, being nearer the customer. And what he highlighted, which was a really fair point, is that hybrid is reality. Microsoft has fully understood that, and that's also my opinion, to be honest. And he said that's easy because Microsoft comes from an on-prem world. It's now a cloud company, but they understood that hybrid is a thing. Quite interesting because SAP is also coming from on-premise, right? Then he switched over to SAP Embrace per se. He said the interest of customers and partners is high, which is, from my perspective, underlined by the results of the DSAG survey. And he also highlighted that the reference architectures that were brought out by Microsoft and SAP are not made in the ivory tower by some high-flying PowerPoint architects, but they are put together with customers, partners, and SAP to solve real-world problems in a real-world setup. And he brought up one example that I highlighted last week or the week before, which was the integration of Active Directory with SuccessFactors. And they first just did the integration with Azure Active Directory. And then customers said and mentioned, well, that's nice, but I do not have an Azure Active Directory. So they enhanced the blueprint in order to take into account the on-prem Active Directory. And he also highlighted that he likes to see the incubation that comes along from the community, especially when it comes to tooling and so on and so forth. So this talk was special to me. not because there were some groundbreaking news, but I highly recommend, if a recording is available of the talk, and I hope it is, watch it, because you will see a highly enthusiastic speaker who really obviously loves what he does. That's what I honestly missed with some speakers from SAP, to be quite honest. And this was really the one of the highlights for me at DSAG, not content-wise, but from the way how things can be presented. Yeah, that was it for day 4. So now we have day 5. Day 5 was today, is still running. Keynote was focusing on human capital management topics by Hermann Josef Haug. And he made some general statements on a survey that was made by DSAG from the human capital perspective on what is important for talents and how to get talents in your company. And most important points are flexible work time, including work from home, flexible times for the home office work, and the chance to decide what to do when you work from home. Because, well, it's quite obvious, but obviously it's not obvious. It makes a difference if you are only allowed to book your timesheet from home and not do any real productive work. Makes no sense. So this is something I think that's quite important for companies being DSAG members who are employing people. Quite valuable things. Then he did a resume on how DSAG influenced SAP in the area of HCM, like bringing HCM and travel management available on S4HANA on-premise, being integrated there, so you do not need to have SuccessFactors or Concur there. And also the availability of SuccessFactors as a cloud-based offering, as a SaaS offering, became much better, which was, when I remember correctly, last year's DSAG annual conference a catastrophe. And then he made one announcement that might be interesting not only for HCM, but also for a lot of other guys and girls out there. Data security, of course, is a big topic in the public sector. It's a big topic for HCM. And there is a white paper in the making, answering some central questions on cloud solutions in the public sector and how to deal with them. Well, then he came over to the usual topics, because they have been highlighted in all the other days, and they are the same for the topic of HCM. So hybrid is key. So that's, for HCM, it's even more important than for the other topics. And end-to-end processes are important. So especially in the area of HCM, you have to focus on the workflow of employees and not on single solutions. Picking up the key assets that were mentioned on day 1 and day 2 especially, he also stressed again that SAP delivered legal changes quite fast, especially in the COVID topics. But he also mentioned the usual obstacles that came along, like licensing of new solutions, transferring of existing contracts, and especially the topic of migrating the ECC HCM to the S4HANA HCM, where we are not talking about tooling, but we're really talking about the conceptual way. One point that he highlighted, and he was the only one in the whole week, is if industry cloud means cloud only, there are a lot of open questions in different industries. So from my perspective, I'm not an HCM guy, but that was a really cool finish of the week, a great talk. And it kind of wrapped up the clear red line, the clear storyline of DSAG's topics that they want to address at SAP. And for me, personally, it's always interesting to see things from different angles, from different perspectives. And to be honest, HCM for me is always a special one because they have some really specific constraints that you do not think about in other areas. Now, there was one further keynote by SAP, which was giving up some top topics for SAP for 2021 concerning the evolution of the intelligent enterprise. Yeah, there were the, let's say, usual S4HANA USPs that have been highlighted. And then there was one topic that, yeah, I think I buried that at the deepest end of my brain. It was about the future of S4. That was, I think, really the original idea. And this was highlighted quite impressively that the idea of S4HANA is that you go now from monolith to a real modular suite of LOB capabilities, including innovative solutions. And the slide that was presented by SAP had some icons on it. And it was quite clear that the final picture of this modular suite, there is no place for on-premise. And that was quite interesting to see. The target picture from SAP's perspective, which is not unusual in the economy, is well, customers will no longer consume solutions, but they will consume services along a specific process, and that's also the goal why SAP wants this modular suite. Then there was one number that was highlighted. 14,600 S4HANA customers are there, or even more. My question on that topic would be, what are S4HANA customers? What I'm interested in is how many customers are live and fully productive with an S4HANA deployment. So customers are, from my perspective, not the right metric. They also highlighted something that was, there were some talks during the week concerning analytics, and that's the deep integration of analytics in all the solutions of SAP is a central topic, and that's of course also a topic on S4. I mean, there is the SAP Analytics Cloud integrated into S4, and then they came to another point, which was extensibility, which is of course one of the central topics of S4HANA. Well, because in the past ERP was extended heavily, and the topic of the clean core was stressed again. What was quite honest, and what is also what is my perception, side-by-side extensions are not really facing the uptake that SAP would like to have. So there are not that many side-by-side extensions that there should be, and they heavily want to enable these side-by-side extensions via giving out further APIs of the S4HANA core in order to decouple the core from the extension. Now then, of course, SAP Industry Cloud was stressed again. The slide that was presented was showing that all industry on one cloud platform. They just made that bold statement. They did not really dig into the open question that was raised by DSAG concerning what about hybrid? What about the restrictions for some industries? That was not that cool. Now, from my perspective, once again, Industry Cloud was pushed forward, especially coming from another point, from the point of a modular suite. And what was also heavily stressed again was that the Industry Cloud is the playground for partners. Now, as I said, open question remains concerning the Industry Cloud, because it's then cloud only. And again, something that I did not like, the presentation of the clean core by SAP. This was not very productive from my perspective. And this is really misleading, especially because the audience at DSAGLive are not purely technical people. And I am convinced that from an architectural perspective, a side-by-side extension is not the solution to every problem. There will be in-app extensions and there will be extensions in the core because it just makes sense from an architectural perspective. And again, stressing that heavily, this topic of the clean core, I think is not so good, I would say. Okay, yeah, that was now quite lengthy session. Shortly summing up, from my perspective, really both sides, DSAG and SAP, had a decent and clear storyline that they followed over the week. Kind of special topic was customer experience, but I think that's the name of the game of customer experience. From my perspective, I'm biased there, but yeah, DSAG addressed the right points, absolutely, in really every talk that I saw. Not really surprising, I mean, their user group. What was also stressed during all the talks that I now did not highlight in every summary of every day is the collaboration between DSAG and SAP overall works great. That's also my personal experience from what I am in touch with SAP. So that's really something, the let's say, influencing and the bringing forward the feedback towards SAP is really something that works. However, it can always become better. And if I did not mention it, it seems that Industry Cloud is really the new thing in the SAP ecosystem. And I would highly recommend for partners to take a closer look at that, because that seems to be really the new playground. Hybrid is reality. That's something that DSAG stressed throughout the whole week. SAP said they see it. Now they have to follow up on that. There have been some surprising announcements from my perspective in context of S4 concerning the migration option to S4 HANA private cloud, the highly modular target architecture, and so on. And well, concerning the SAP collaborating with hyperscalers, not only Microsoft, I would say that's overall. It's a bit foggy. There have been many strange side remarks during the 5 days, especially in the first 2 days. Maybe I'm misinterpreting them. I don't know, but I did not like what I heard, to be honest. It was a bit like SAP is going back and pushing back hyperscalers. I hope I really misinterpret that. And what was also a point that came across several talks, there wasn't a special talk about that, was organizational topics and culture. They have been really stressed in some talks, and that becomes more and more important. And that's arriving now also in our SAP community. I think in other communities that's already kind of the usual thing. Now this is also getting more and more into this special community. Yeah, so that was not really a long episode. It was a long week for DSAGLive. I hope I could give you some wrap up on the DSAGLive. I hope you enjoyed it. I see you again next week. Then we will have the usual agenda. Then we will have a shorter session on the topics. And I wish you a nice Friday, a nice weekend, and see you next week. Bye.